First of all, give us some statistics about the United Negro College Fund, how you funded students and why it's so important that this funding keeps rising.
So we're a 76-year-old organization. We were founded in 1944. We raised $750,000 that first year. We've raised $5 billion over the 76 years. We've awarded scholarships to over 500,000 students who have gone on to earn a college degree, and we've also supported historically Black colleges throughout that time. Annually, we support students to the tune of about $100 million a year.
Now, we're also seeing that 50% of Black students are the first college attendees in their home, for example. So it's incredibly important to keep those numbers rising. Michael, we've seen some other historic Black colleges and universities go to the bond market recently. Tell us why that's not such a good idea for these particular colleges and universities.
Well, remember, when you go to the bond market, you may get good rates, but you are in fact borrowing, and you do have to pay that back. And we think that in very volatile times like right now, it might make sense if you can get a lower interest rate and you've already got debt to refinance. But we think that borrowing based on enrollment projections in 2020 may be challenging because you just aren't sure whether you're going to be able to sustain the enrollment, whether enrollment will decline. And we really face right now an existential moment for Black college students who are going to college because the Black community has been hardest hit by COVID, severe unemployment. Students who have been going to college may not be able to return to college because they don't have the resources to pay for tuition, and or they're the only breadwinner left in the family. So that's why UNCF is working right now to do everything that we can to ensure that when our colleges are able to open, they open with strong enrollment, that their students have the resources to be able to remain there, and that they get the education that they need to not be the first in their family to go to college, so that they become the first of many in their families who go on to college, and they get all the benefits of a college education, which include getting a better job, joining the middle class, and not being eligible for Pell Grants, which is the number one way that the U.S. government now supports the lowest income students who go to college. And 76% of the students who go to HBCUs are low income, and 50% of them are the first in their family to go to college.
Many of your members, of course, also competing against liberal schools that have billion-dollar endowments and more than that.
Well, they're not really competing because, you know, the rich schools, the elite schools, the ones that set the highest selection standards, they're skimming a very small percentage of Black students. Historically, Black colleges have the highest enrollments they've had in generations. And when you add on to that what we call predominantly Black institutions, which is schools with about 60% of their students are African American, then these account for almost 500,000 students attending college. There are a whole bunch of low-income students who are trying to break the cycle of poverty by going to college, but very few of them get accepted to the most elite institutions with the big endowments. Those institutions have the lowest percentages of low-income students, and even their Black students are wealthy.
Sure, I suppose I mean mainly in the bond market, which means that sometimes some of your member institutions have a lower credit rating, which makes it more expensive, but also competing for dollars, right, for philanthropic dollars. Talk to us about your new fund, and obviously we've heard about UNCF in the news in recent weeks because of Reed Hastings' generous donation, but it's really just a tiny drop in the ocean of philanthropic dollars that are out there.
Well, there's huge wealth in America right now. It's highly concentrated, but it's also very generous. But its generosity has been largely focused on elite private and public institutions that don't really serve a low-income, first-generation Black college students. And our institutions, and there are 101 historically Black colleges, they represent about 3% of all the colleges and universities in America. They enroll 10% of the Black college students who are going to college, but they produce 20% of the graduates and 25% of the STEM graduates. So They are high impact institutions, and the students who graduate from there within a decade after graduation are earning around $71,000 a year. So they are engines of social mobility. But these institutions really haven't been the darlings of the philanthropic world. And what we're saying to the philanthropic world is invest in historically Black colleges and universities. And UNCF is creating a strategic impact investment fund, which will do the following. It will help with more scholarship support for the lowest income students so that they don't have to borrow and they don't graduate with heavy debt. And we're going to build endowments. American colleges and universities are some of the wealthiest in the world. Harvard University alone has a $40+ billion endowment. But when you add up the endowments of all 101 historically Black colleges, it's less than $4 billion. So it's less than 10% of even Harvard's endowment. So we really believe that we've got to challenge American philanthropy, the wealthiest, the most successful, and the most generous, to begin to invest in the institutions which are the workhorses, serving the lowest income people in the Black community and moving them out of poverty and into the middle class, helping them to be the last in their families to be poor and the first in their families to be college graduates.
Tell us what you're targeting, so 6 to 10 billion, but that's over the longer term, and you've just made a little bit of a start on this. So give us just some more details on what actually sold it to Reed Hastings, if all of that wasn't already enough.
Well, let me just say, Reed Hastings is one of the most innovative people. He is a contrarian, if you know Reed. He always takes the opposite position. We have argued with one another on the board of the KIPP charter schools for the last 15 years, but we've also built a very strong friendship. And I can say that Patty Quillen, his wife, and Reed Hastings are deeply committed to ending inequality in America. And they believe that education is the best lever. And they've supported K through 12. Patty's been very involved in criminal justice reform. But they've come together and understood that historically Black colleges are making a big difference in the lives of their students. And they can make an even bigger difference if they have the resources to help those students with strong scholarships. So yes. I took Reed and Patty to visit Morehouse and Spelman and Clark Atlanta University last year. They've decided to make an initial set of gifts to Morehouse, to Spelman, and to UNCF of $40 million each, $120 million. And they're already seeing the return on that investment. The Community Foundation in Memphis also made a $40 million gift to a historically Black college.
Michael, we will definitely follow this as it goes along.